Hey everyone, Rick here, and folks, we are back with match number 4 for the Battlefields of Mana Social Media Showdown. We have one Facebooker left, Aaron B, representing the Regal Guard. The army is comprised of 2 units of swordsmen, 2 units of mounted archers, and 1 unit of heavy cavalry. We've already seen how insane heavy cav can be. It's time to find out what YouTuber, who it is that Aaron is going up against representing the Lunar Knights. We have 3 possibilities. Let's actually go through these. So what's going to happen is Aaron will fight one of them. The other 2, in kind of a Civil War style fashion, are going to fight each other so that everyone still gets to be involved. And then we will call it a day for these viewer matchups. All right, so who's it going to be? It could be Ben. Ben went with 2 archers, a unit of crossbowmen, a unit of flailbearers, and a unit of men-at-arms. Now, you'll notice Aaron has 5 total units in his army. Ben has 4, 2 of which are pretty powerful. Next up is Ben S., aka Mr. Man, with 2 units of spears, a unit of flailbearers. We have mounted crossbowmen and a unit of foot crossbowmen. So 5 units here as well. That's kind of an interesting matchup when you look at it. We have 2 units of spears versus 2 units of swords. We have heavy cavalry and flail bearers. Those are the 2 heavy-hitting melee units. And then we also have 2 mounted archers versus mounted crossbows and crossbows. That could be a fantastic matchup. And then this last one is the largest army that anyone suggested. It is 7 units in size. 2 units of archers, 2 units of swordsmen, 2 units of peasant militia, and a unit of heavy cavalry. Now, it's actually very similar to Aaron's. Instead, though, the archers in Dr. Professor Hazmat's army are on foot, whereas Aaron's are mounted. So, getting rid of the mobility of the archers allowed Dr. Professor Hazmat to include 2 units of 1 point apiece peasant militia. So, meat shields for sure. But anyway, all these matchups are going to be interesting, no matter which one it ends up being. But let's find out who it is. And then, of course, the other 2 will be in a future video facing off against each other. All right, who's it going to be? It is Ben! All right. So we have 2 units of archers, crossbow, flailbearers, and men-at-arms against 2 units of swords, 2 mounted archers, and a unit of heavy cavalry. So 2 fairly different armies. This one's going to be very interesting. All right, folks, we will be back after deployment. All right, folks, here is deployment. Aaron and the Regal Guard won the roll-off to pick a side, deploy first, and go first. Aaron chose this side. I think pretty much everyone has chosen the side with the trees favoring them so that they can use them as a cover advantage, especially when their opponent is consistently range heavy. So again, and we'll get into Ben's deployment in a second. Let's focus on Aaron. So what Aaron did was he stuck the heavy cavalry right there. I was originally thinking about putting them where I eventually put those swordsmen so they wouldn't have any obstruction as they ran up. But with all of these ranged units, I figure the heavy cavalry obviously is pretty fast, being cavalry. They can navigate through that little portion of the woods pretty easily. But even so, it'll at least give him an opportunity to get a cover save if those archers decide to move up and take shots. Mounted archers, next to them, I'm kind of debating whether I want to eventually rush them up into the edge of the woods there and take shots, or if maybe we just kind of move them up that way and have just a clear view over across that side. Swordsmen, they are positioned so that they can just run up straight on that side of the board. These swordsmen, similarly over here, being able to navigate right past the woods, and then a unit of mounted archers, as fast and as nimble as they are, there's going to be no catching them. So we're going to have some fun running around with those mounted archers. So first unit Ben stuck out were these crossbowmen. That was in direct response to the heavy cavalry being put there, because Ben wants the superior firepower of the crossbows to engage those heavy cavalry from afar. Additionally, men-at-arms. Men-at-arms are slow. They are the slowest unit in this entire game. So Ben wanted to put those where they wouldn't be obstructed by any terrain, so they have a clear path either moving up this way or even turning and coming down through here. Either way, though, they're supported by those archers. And the reason I did that was the archers are only a 2-point unit. They can act kind of as meat shields if necessary until the men-at-arms get where they need to go. So the archers are probably going to stick out in front of the men-at-arms, and they'll both move as a column, and the archers will just absorb shots if those mounted archers start taking shots, because we really don't want to lose too much of those men-at-arms because they are a pricier unit, but they have a good defensive ability. So either way, we'll find out how that ends up working out. But I also kind of did the same thing down here with the flail bearers and these archers. These archers may be acting a little bit as meat shields for the flail bearers until they get into position as well, also still shooting all the same. So what are the target priorities? Well, Ben obviously would love to take out that unit of heavy cavalry, but as long as Ben can cut some units in half without suffering too much damage himself, and maybe getting these flail bearers engaged to those swordsmen, for example, and those men-at-arms engaged to those swordsmen, and eliminating those units, that'll be a decent amount of points. For Aaron, obviously the big money units are the men-at-arms and the flail bearers. So if he can take out one of those units entirely, that'll be a big score. But also just cutting them in half will add up the points as well. So it'll be a very interesting round one, which we'll be back at the end of, and we'll see how things turn out. Okay, folks, end of round one, and it is shaping up to be an absolute slugfest. So Aaron went first. Aaron shot these mounted archers straight up. He wanted to get some shots in at the flail bearers while they were still sitting there. So that's exactly what he did. Even with the move and shoot penalty, they were still able to do 2 wounds and peeled off a flail bearer. Next, these swordsmen just moved straight ahead. Heavy cavalry charged straight into the woods. They're now at the very tip of the woods, so now they have their options wide open where they want to go after leaving the woods next turn. Mounted archers charged as far as they could up through the woods. Unfortunately, that meant they didn't have a shot at the time. Everyone was out of range, and those swordsmen also moved up. So we kind of have a cohesive battle line, essentially pretty much straight down the side here, except for these mounted archers who wanted to get up as far as they could to get some shots in at those flail bearers. Otherwise, Ben moved the men-at-arms up as far as they could go. These archers, I was going to stick them in front of the men-at-arms to keep the men-at-arms safe, but I wanted them to take some shots. They shot into the woods at these mounted archers. Now, that meant the mounted archers had a better defense because they're in cover. But, with only 2 ranged units in this army, every figure you peel off of a ranged unit is another shot lost. So they were at 6 shots now. So we wanted to try to get rid of some of those shots. And so the archers fired. Unfortunately, the trees provided enough cover so that we did not take any wounds on the mounted archers. These crossbows moved up as far as they could. Well, not as far as they could, but as far as they could go without getting involved in melee. So if these heavy cavalry used their full movement, they would stop just shy of the crossbowmen. So the crossbowmen wouldn't have to worry about breaking away or anything like that. Unfortunately, moving at that position, which was as far as a single movement action could take them, they didn't have anyone at the time within their 8-inch range. So, flail bearers charge straight up here and have a couple options open to them. Of course, these mounted archers probably aren't going to stay there much longer, but swordsmen and heavy cavalry over there, so they may be thinking about moving that way. These archers moved up and also got shots off, and yes, we're able to peel off a mounted archer, and that's a big deal because that unit now only gets 5 shots. All right, so that is everything at the end of round 1. I mean, does that not just look absolutely gorgeous? It looks so good. All right, now we're going to break it down by turns now that the pace is picking up a bit here. So we'll be back at the end of Aaron's turn 2. All right, folks, I apologize. I got so caught up in the action, I neglected to record the end of Aaron's turn 2. So this is the end of round 2. Oh my gosh. Ben, I just want to apologize in advance for my poor rolling. We'll get into why in just a second. So Aaron, on his turn, moved those swordsmen up just enough so that when the men-at-arms moved up, they wouldn't be able to get a charge in. It would take both of their moves, hence that double move token, in order to get into contact. So no contact there. These archers, though, took shots at the men-at-arms and did 4 wounds, and that's why there are missing men-at-arms. These swordsmen moved up as far as they could. Unfortunately, I neglected to consider the fact that these crossbows could see these heavy cavalry right in the flank. Otherwise, I probably would have shuffled them over a little bit more. But they were eager to either now go into the flank of the men-at-arms or go tackle one of these 2 ranged units. The heavy cavalry just moved as far as they could. It wasn't quite enough to get into contact with those flail bearers, but because, you know, that would have been important. Even if it took both of their move actions, the heavy cavalry would have gotten collision hits, which unfortunately they did not get. Though, as you can see, we'll discuss in a second why that wasn't even necessary. These mounted archers took a step back because they were afraid the flail bearers may come at them and get a charge off. So they stepped back and fired. I believe they did pick off a flail bearer or 2. And so on Ben's turn, he moved these archers here because the flail bearers charged into contact with those heavy cavalry. And kind of how I neglected to look at the line of fire over there, I did look at the line of fire here, and I didn't want on Aaron's turn him to be able to shoot those flail bearers in the flank. Unfortunately, putting those archers there to stop that meant they had used more than one movement action, and so they were unable to get shots off this turn. Flail bearers, when they charged in, still had 4 troops in their unit. 1 had a wound on him, I think. But still, plenty of attacks. And if you know flail bearers, they get an extra die roll when attacking in the first round of combat, and their 6s explode. But that's really only beneficial if you have more than 1 flail bearer left. So these were both +4 initiative bonus units. The cavalry is a +3, and they have an ability that gives them a +1 in addition to that when they're going up against non-polearm infantry. So they were a +4. Flail bearers are normally a +3, but they charged, so they were a +4. So it was 4-4, and unfortunately I rolled higher for the heavy cavalry, which wouldn't have been the absolute worst, but oh my gosh, I rolled, you know, kind of average for the heavy cavalry attack roll. I rolled all 1s and 2s. Well, okay, so if I remember right, I rolled 8 hits with the heavy cavalry, needing 3s or better. So 8 3s or better. And in defense for the flail bearers, I rolled 8 dice, and I rolled 6 1s and 2s. So that's 6 wounds. No, one of the flail bearers did not have a wound on him because, yeah, I did 6 wounds to the flail bearers, and that took off 3 flail bearers. So now they're down to their last flail bearer. That last banner bearer, flail bearer, I got his attack off, and it did not do a single wound to the heavy cavalry. Oh my gosh, that's a 4-point unit of flail bearers right there that's just sitting there. So anyway, first point to Aaron, who has now cut that unit in half or more. So that's 1 victory point. It'll be an additional 3 victory points if he can finish him off. And that was Ben's turn that happened on. So now it is back over to Aaron, and I promise next time I will record at the end of Aaron's turn 3. All right, folks, this is the end of Aaron's turn 3. A lot has happened. Swordsmen brace themselves up there. The ball is in Aaron's court. After what happened to Ben's flail bearers, the ball is in Aaron's court. So he's just bracing. He's going to make it as hard for those men-at-arms to do anything to them as possible. Mounted archers in the woods took shots at those archers, killing 1. These swordsmen charged into the crossbowmen, taking a wound because of the free volley that they get. And then in melee, they traded wounds. Swordsmen did 3 wounds to the crossbows. Crossbows did 1 wound in return, which is why there's a missing swordsman. The flail bearer that last flail bearer actually killed off a heavy cavalry before then being annihilated. It was 7 hits this time, so I rolled 7 defense dice for the flail bearer, 5 of which were 1s and 2s. I mean, you can't make this up. I should record these dice rolls. But anyway, so the heavy cavalry killed off that unit of flail bearers, and now they have reformed. I was thinking about reforming them that way so they could charge up and get involved in the men-at-arms, but I would be exposing my rear to these archers, and we really don't need that, so we've reformed this way. So now we have to see what these poor archers want to do. They're all alone over here now. These mounted archers shot into them, killing 1. And that is it for Aaron's turn 3. Now over to Ben's turn 3. All right, folks, this is the end of Ben's turn 3, thus the end of round 3. The game is half over. These archers reformed, shot into the heavy cavalry, doing a wound. That heavy cav unit's almost cut in half. They are giving their rear to those mounted archers, but it was either shoot at the mounted archers or try to cut that unit in half and not be attacked in the rear. Also, being in this position means when if the heavy cav charge into the front, they'll get a free volley off, which is another opportunity to try to cut that 5-point unit of heavy cavalry in half. In other news, these crossbowmen actually were successfully able to break away, and in conjunction with those archers, they killed off a swordsman. Men-at-arms had a fairly mediocre attack roll, still were able to kill off a swordsman, taking a wound in return, and that is where we are, heading into Aaron's turn 4. All right, folks, the end of Aaron's turn 4. What a bloody turn 4. Swordsmen brace themselves. Mounted archers in the woods shot, only doing a wound, so not a whole lot up top. Now the swordsmen charged into the crossbows, took some wounds from the free volley, so that swordsman unit has been cut in half. In melee, the swordsman did 3 wounds, taking out the rest of the back rank of the crossbows. Crossbows couldn't do anything in return in melee. Heavy cavalry charged in. They did take a wound from the free volley, and that heavy cav unit has now been cut in half. These mounted archers shot into the rear of the archers, doing at least a wound or 2. The cavalry, when they charged in, got collision hits, also doing some wounds. So, I mean, right off the bat, those poor archers were cut in half. And then in melee, the heavy cav just absolutely slaughtered them. So there's that banner bearer is all that remains of that unit of archers with a single wound left. And now we will see how Ben responds at the end of Ben's turn 4. All right, folks, and here we are at the end of Ben's turn 4. A very good turn in terms of offensive attacks for Ben. Hopefully it's not a little too late. So this archer actually tried to break away because it has a better shot of breaking away and then shooting than it does in melee. Of course, it is not long for this life left. But so its best opportunity was to break away and shoot, and I think the target would have been maybe the mounted archers, to do a wound to them, and hopefully maybe someone else up here can cut that unit in half and score a point or something. But either way, it doesn't matter. They failed to break away, so they are bracing themselves. Unit of crossbows also failed to break away, so they brace themselves. These archers shot into the flank of these swordsmen, doing a decent amount of wounds. There's only 2 swordsmen left with a wound there, and then men-at-arms doing what men-at-arms do, absolutely crushing that unit of swordsmen, doing 5 wounds. And thanks to their superior defense, the swordsmen did not a single wound in return. So things are looking a little bit better up top here. Not so good over here. Of course, that early loss of the flail bearers just crippled Ben. So we'll see what ends up happening. We're moving on to the final third of the game, beginning round 5. We'll be back at the end of Aaron's turn 5. Oh my gosh, what a turn 5. Now, if Ben had rolled as well defensively early on as he did in this turn, things would be a whole lot different. First, let's talk down here. That flail bear, yes, got absolutely massacred in close combat. But more importantly, what it did was it held up the heavy cavalry. You're not going to believe this. The heavy cav tried to break away because they figure they have 2 turns left. Let's get them involved somewhere, or at least, do something instead of getting stuck down here. They failed to break away. So initiative bonus of a +4 for the heavy cavalry, initiative bonus of a +0 for that lowly little archer. And he rolled a 5, the heavy cav rolled a 1, so it was tied 5-5, and so the heavy cav failed to break away. These archers shot into that lone archer with only 1 wound left, and they failed to do a single wound. So it literally came down to that close combat between the heavy cav and that lonely archer, where the heavy cav did strike first. They get 9 attack dice, all +1. In melee, archers are -1. So any 6s, any 5s or 6s that the heavy cav rolls are going to be auto wounds. Because the most an archer can roll, when they roll a 6, it becomes a 5 due to the -1 penalty. So any 6s, any 5s or 6s the heavy cav roll become auto wounds. They did roll 3 5s and 6s that resulted in 6s after the +1 bonus. So that archer met its end, but not before absolutely pissing off these 2 units down here. Up here, this swordsman decided to attack the crossbows. I don't know, maybe they should have braced themselves. But they attacked. They did a single wound to the crossbows. The crossbows did wounds in return, and now that swordsman unit's been whittled down to only its banner bearer. These mounted archers shot into that unit of archers, doing a wound? Did they do any wounds? I can't remember. Yeah, I think they did a wound or 2. So there's only, but that unit of archers still isn't cut in half yet. I think maybe it was only a wound. And then, of course, these swordsmen just braced themselves up here. So it was an incredible round defensively for Ben. So now it's Ben's turn 5. Okay, folks, Ben's turn 5. These crossbows failed to break away, so they are sitting there bracing themselves. These archers figure they can take that guy out maybe next turn. We'll see what ends up happening. But they decided they wanted to try to get as many points as possible. A couple volleys on these mounted archers, maybe cut them in half and score a point, or shoot down here at the heavy cav. So the way I figure it is, these heavy cav are armor 3, which means only 4s or better can hit them, and they get a reroll on their defense roll. These mounted archers are only armor 1, so 2s or better will hit them, and being in the woods, they also get a defensive reroll. Either way, we'd have to kill 3 of those, or 3 of those, and so I figured let's try to start killing 3 of those. Unfortunately, they didn't do a single wound. Men-at-Arms up here almost cut that swordsman unit down to the banner bearer. Only did 2 wounds though, thanks to that brace die. In response, the swordsman actually did 2 wounds back to the men-at-arms. I rolled terribly for their defense. And that is where we are. We are entering the final round of the game, round 6, and we'll be back at the end of Aaron's turn 6. Oh my gosh, of course things couldn't just end easily. Ben really had to put up a fight here. So here's what happened. For Aaron, there are no more points to really be gathered. Once you cut a unit in half, you get a victory point. You have to kill off the rest of the unit for any further points. That's not going to happen there, obviously. That is impossible to happen there. The only option for Aaron was this. Now, that unit of archers still did not have that wound on it at the beginning of the turn. So what Aaron did was it was just bracing himself there. Did he try? Actually, you know what? These swordsmen up here tried to break away because they're faster than the men-at-arms. When you break away, you get a free reform, and then he could have used both his movement actions to just move away, but he failed to break away. So they're sitting there bracing themselves again. This swordsman's just bracing himself down here. These archers in the woods took shots at that unit of archers, wanting to cut them in half. Ben said no, only a single wound. These heavy cavalry, thanks to that damn archer from the last turn, they're basically out of the game. They had nowhere to go. They couldn't reach anybody within 10 inches. So they just moved up to get out of the way because these mounted archers swung in here and they wanted to finish off that last archer in the back rank. 5 shots. Of course, they moved and shoot penalty, so that was a -1 to their shots. But still, 5 shots. They all hit, but Ben's defense roll blocked them all. And Aaron's turn's essentially over, so that is a point saved right there, which is absolutely insane. So, yep, all we did was brace ourselves, shoot, moved. And now it is Ben's turn 6. And we'll be back at the end of the game to wrap things up. All right, folks, here it is, the end of the game. I think Aaron's troops heard me bragging about Ben's defense rolls in the second half of the game because Aaron rolled like an absolute fiend, and unfortunately Ben did not. So, Ben, on the final turn, these crossbowmen were able to break away. They took shots at the last swordsman. They did a wound. These archers also shot into the last swordsman. They could not do a single wound. That is it. That swordsman survived. Up here, similar situation. The men-at-arms went first, and they rolled one of the worst attack rolls of all time. Everything was 3 or less, and did not do a single wound, I don't think. Yeah, they did not do a single wound. The swordsman, in return, did a wound, which killed off another men-at-arms. So that is it. This is where the game ends, so let's tally up the points. How many points did Ben actually score? Well, Ben scored 1 point for cutting them in half, 1 point for cutting them in half, and 1 point for cutting them in half. Is that it? 2 swordsmen, 2 mounted archers, and heavy cap. Yeah, that's it. So 3 points. 3 points. There's 2 points still on the table between those 2 swordsman unit remnants. So he could have got up to 5, but ended up with 3 points for cutting those 3 units in half. Aaron, on the other hand, completely eliminated 1 unit of archers for 2 points, 1 unit of flailbearers for 4 points, that's 6 points. They also cut those crossbows in half and the men-at-arms in half for 2 more points. That's 8 points. So it ends up being 8-3 victory for the Regal Guard. So who were the MVPs of the game? Well, I guess the survivors, like that swordsman saving himself a point, those swordsmen saving themselves a point. The heavy cav really crushing that unit of archers. I almost forgot. The heavy cav 100% for completely obliterating those flail bearers. That was absolutely insane. It kind of unfortunately set the tone for the whole match. Ben had such an uphill battle to climb after losing. You know, when you're talking a 15-point battle, a 4-point unit is nearly a third of your army. And just my terrible defense roll twice just absolutely eliminated them from contention. So, and there was not a lot of points that were easy to get, especially since the rest of the army was really ranged units, and then those men-at-arms which were stuck with the swordsmen and just could not end up finishing them off. So MVP for Aaron are definitely those mounted or the heavy cavalry. MVP for Ben, maybe that archer for keeping this southern portion of Aaron's army at bay. I kind of wanted to say the men-at-arms because they were really doing a decent job up there, but a 4-point unit not being able to finish off a 2-point unit, I can't call them an MVP. These crossbows, you know, sticking it out in melee with that swordsman as long as they did, but they couldn't finish off the swordsman even at range either. Things for Ben were not going very well, but that is it. Victory to Aaron and the Regal Guard. That is 3 Facebook victories to 1 YouTube victory, and that is it, folks. I had an absolute blast. Stay tuned for the next and final installment where we put 2 YouTubers against each other. But otherwise, thank you all so much for watching. I do truly appreciate it. And until next time.